Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. My name's Carol Shariat, and we're here to have our community workshop here for our Pruneridge Avenue Complete Streets Plan. We had the same presentation Wednesday night and had a really great turnout, so we're really glad you could join us today. Next slide. We had many ways that we want, for everyone to connect with us and connect with us on the project and hear your feedback and your comments. And so we've dedicated a webpage just to the project where you can get quite a bit of information on the project itself. You also can sign up for these type of community meetings, and also we post online surveys that folks can, and just a history of the project if you want to learn more about the project. We also have a dedicated phone number where you can leave a voicemail and provide any feedback that maybe you couldn't present here at our community workshops. And then we also have a dedicated email address as well, where you can email us your feedback as well. Next slide. So what we're going to talk about today is I'll do some introductions as to who's been helping the city on this project, and city staff as well working on the project. We want to give you a little bit of history on the project, just in case maybe you couldn't make some of the community meetings in the past. We also want to present to you our pedestrian recommended improvements along the corridor, which is something new that you'll get to see today. We also wanted to show you our revised corridor concepts, and those are all based on feedback that we got either through our online surveys or through our community workshops that we have heard from you all. And so we made some adjustments to the concepts based on your feedback. And the meat of the presentation today will really be on the analysis and the results of our transportation analysis. It's really about our results and how it affects each concepts. Then we'll go into next steps, where we're going to go with the project after this community meeting. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with questions and answers. And feel free to, you can raise your hand at any point or type in, if you don't want to speak, you can also type in the chat a question and we'll answer them. Especially if there's hands raised, we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Next. And once again, my name's Carol Shariat, and I'm the project manager for this project. Other staff working on this project as well as Michael Liu, our Assistant Public Works Director. We have Jonathan Yee, our Transportation Manager. And I also have with me our consultants helping us complete this plan, which is Jeff Knowles, Ryan Booth, and Ben Frazier. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Knowles, who will continue this presentation.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks everybody. I see 19 attendees here from the area, so appreciate you coming out on a Saturday afternoon. This is our encore presentation. We had one well-attended Wednesday night, so we had about 55 folks show up for the Wednesday night version. If you're wondering if it's any different, these slides are the exact same information. We just want to give people different opportunities to be here and hear the information that's being shared. So before we dive into information that we want to bring back to the public, I'd like to start with some poll questions, make it a little interactive and get some information from you at the outset. So let's go ahead and launch those polls. The first one is, where do you live? This is important information just to kind of get a sense of who's in the room with us. So it's a multi-choice. Do you live directly on Pruneridge, within a few blocks of Pruneridge, different area, but still within the city, neighboring city, or somewhere else? So, all right. With a small group, we can get through it pretty quickly. So give folks about 10 more seconds and make your selection here. Looking like a lot of folks are within a few blocks of his. So, all right, 5 more seconds. All right, so we've got about 75% of the folks in our virtual room today live within a few blocks of Pruneridge, so welcome. A handful within different parts of the city or neighboring city jurisdiction. Maybe they use Pruneridge to get to shops or jobs or other uses. So thanks to everybody for being here. Appreciate it. We got one more poll to get to. Okay, John, go ahead and launch the second poll, which is, how did you hear about today's meeting? And we're asking that information because we want to make sure that we get the word out. As part of our notification, we sent out over 7,500 postcards to notice this meeting. So hopefully you got one of those. If not, hopefully you learned about it through the city's website and social media channels, which we use to advertise, maybe other social media from different stakeholders or partners. The city of Santa Clara sent out emails alerting residents to this meeting, or maybe other methods like word of mouth. Maybe your neighbor told you about this meeting. We're interested in doing more and doing better to make sure that as many people who would like to be here are able to do so. So let us know how you learned about the meeting. Looks like we're getting good responses. I'm gonna go ahead and say 5 more seconds to get your question or your responses in. All right. So 60% got our postcard. Great, I'm glad you got that. And then another 53% got an email. So I'm glad that that worked out as well. Appreciate you getting those and maybe even sharing those with neighbors, friends, residents, family members. All right, go ahead and close this poll and move on with the presentation. So as Carol mentioned, if you've got questions or you want to provide feedback, we'll be doing that at the Q&A session at the end. But feel free during the course of the presentation to use the Q&A window, which should be at the bottom of your screen. You can go ahead and start typing in your questions, and we'll either save those for the Q&A, or we have staff here that Carol introduced that can be introducing those along the way. So a little bit project history. Why are we here? Project is included in the city's general plan, and it's a high priority corridor in both the city and county bicycle plans. Council directed staff to pursue the project, and the city applied and received grant funding from Caltrans to produce a complete streets plan. So what is this plan going to do? It's going to improve bicycle and pedestrian connections on Pruneridge Avenue. It's going to look at improving the comfort and safety of all users of the roadway, analyze and summarize traffic, parking, and collision analysis along the corridor. And what we're here today really is to seek and record community input at multiple points along the process. And how will decisions be made? First, community input and data are guiding the development of these conceptual roadway designs. What we're going to present to council includes all the community input we received, not just at the workshops, but any email we received, voicemail message, all of the surveys that we've conducted as well. All that's being cataloged and will be part of information that we share with council. We'll be sharing all the technical analysis that we're going to share with you today, along with the corridor improvement ideas that help meet the goals of the plan. I think what's most important and clear to understand is that City Council will decide if and how the plan moves forward. To underscore that, there is no funding dedicated to design or build any of these options right now. So we're very at the visioning stage, very early on. There's no money for any construction of these. So we are looking for your input about what the future of Pruneridge could look like. But to reiterate, there's no funding for any of these projects to move forward unless City Council made that a priority and dedicated funding for the city. So the Pruneridge area, what we're doing is studying a 2.2-mile corridor from Winchester Boulevard, which is your city border with City of San Jose, all the way to Pomeroy, which is about less than a mile from Apple Park, so a major employer in the area. And on the east side, you're just 0.3 of a mile from Santana Row, which is a big retail and shopping and restaurant district. So you got good connectivity there. It's also the areas that are bounded by where there already has been a road reconstruction. So there are 3 lanes in each, 3 lanes on Heading Street, which is what Pruneridge becomes in San Jose. And then there are 3 lanes on Pomeroy on Pruneridge from Pomeroy over to Tantau. Where are we in the project schedule? So this project kicked off last winter. We had 2 rounds of community workshops. That's where we were information gathering. We were listening to people's preferences, getting people's visions and ideas for the corridor, and collecting a lot of information. Then over the spring and summer, we started to put that information into roadway concepts. We shared them out with the public. We did 2 more rounds of workshops. And then over the fall and winter, we've revised those roadway concepts based off the input we received, and I'll be ready to share that tonight. We've also looked at pedestrian improvements, which is something that we did not look at in detail earlier on. So we've gone back and evaluated opportunities there to make it easier to walk. And then what we'll be going from here is taking this input and revising it, putting it into a public draft for council and the public to review again before council makes a decision. So activities completed to date, that first phase of community engagement, that was the 7,000 postcards going out to everybody within a half-mile of the corridor, holding 2 workshops, having an online survey, meeting with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and 5 stakeholder meetings with businesses and civic organizations around Pruneridge Avenue. We developed our draft corridor concepts. We held our second round of community engagement. We analyzed the existing and conceptual corridor analyses to understand the impacts that each of the concepts would have on traffic, on parking, on congestion. And we refined the corridor concepts, and we presented that first to the BPAC and then also to the public last Wednesday night. So what did we hear? Some of the things that we heard when we were first starting out this project is we asked people to identify words that they use to describe the corridor, living on or driving on or walking on Pruneridge Avenue today. And the larger the words in this word cloud means the more often people would cite that word or a word similar to it. And so you can see here as people identify it as busy, as traffic, it's fast. Some people said it was unsafe, it's wide. Some people said dangerous or collisions. Then we said, all right, close your eyes and imagine what could Pruneridge be in the future? If you could have a chance, an opportunity to change things, what would you like to see? And so we asked people to pick 1 or 2 or 3 words. We see safe, bike lanes. Some people said unchanged, slower, no gridlock, right? These are some of the words that I'm just pulling out here. All of that really boiled down into a couple of themes that we heard pretty loud and clear. One is that people wanted to see Pruneridge have slower traffic speeds, so calmer traffic speeds. Also, folks really mentioned a lot of the concerns about traffic congestion during the AM and the PM peak periods. We heard that people wanted to improve bicycling options and improve the walking conditions. And also we heard pretty clearly that people wanted to preserve the on-street parking options. So all that together that informed the work that we did in terms of coming up with these ideas, these concepts. I want to start first by talking about the pedestrian improvements. And these improvements come directly from the city's pedestrian master plan, which looked comprehensively at where the city could make improvements for crossing the street or walking along streets to get to destinations. So these are the tools that we have that come directly from that master plan process. We have features and elements like the pedestrian crossing sign to alert motorists where crosswalks are located. We have markings like standard crosswalk markings that you see here, the 2 white lines. You have advanced yield lines and stop bars. And these advanced yield lines are these triangles. That's just to let people know you should not, if you're driving, not park right up on or stop right on a crosswalk. You want to set back. That gives more visibility for people crossing the street. We looked at opportunities to improve ADA curb ramps for people that need wheelchairs or walkers or strollers. We also looked at opportunities to reduce the curb radius, which is kind of a fancy word for basically saying, make it so cars need to slow down more when making turns. When you have these wide sweeping turns, you can really take those at high speeds, which can be quite a conflict and create more collisions with people walking. So we've looked for opportunities where we can tighten that up a little bit and shorten the crossing distance. We've looked at opportunities to improve right turn slip lanes. And if you want to think about where those located at Saratoga and San Tomas Expressway, that's where you have the right turn slip lane that doesn't have a signal, and you can take those again at pretty high speeds. It becomes a little bit of a conflict point for people walking. So there's different designs you can do to slow those down. Finally, we looked at opportunities to add countdown timers for pedestrians, along with accessible pedestrian signals. And those are the devices that communicate walk or don't walk for people that have visual impairments. Finally, we looked at opportunities for traffic study for intersections that might need a stop control or stop signs or other signals or beacons. And that would require a little more data than we could collect in this process. So I'm not going to go through every intersection, but I will note we've got ideas for improvements at each of these. The slideshow will be posted on the project website, and also we'll email it out to anybody that registered for this meeting tonight. So you can go through this in more detail, but for benefit of time, I'm just going to kind of show you what these look like. So you can see those icons match up with these icons that I've shared with you here. And then you can kind of see at each intersection. So at Pomeroy, we're recommending reducing that curb radius and adding a countdown timer on at least one of those legs. We've got these for all the way through Redwood and Cedar Way. We've also noted some that will require more coordination, such as San Tomas Expressway, which is not really under the control of the city. It's managed by the county. And so you have to work with Santa Clara County for any changes there. There also are portions of this corridor that are within the city of San Jose's jurisdiction on the south side of Pruneridge Avenue, starting around Henry Avenue all the way to Winchester. So you can see those here as well. In terms of the corridor concepts, if you're new to this project, I'm going to go through those in a little more detail, but we've presented these previously to the public and heard some clear concerns about what we presented, and we've identified some revisions to those. So one thing that we heard in the last round was concerns from residents who live directly on Pruneridge about getting in and out of driveways. And so we've come up with driveway sightline buffers. I'll point those out in the concepts in a second. I also heard it's unclear where trash receptacles should be located. So we've identified where those could be picked up, where you could store your trash receptacles on pickup days. So as a little orientation, I think most folks are familiar with it, but if not, this is Pruneridge Avenue today. This is not really any intersection in particular. This is a prototypical segment of the corridor. You have 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. They are 12 feet wide. Then you have 2 parking lanes on street, parallel parking, that's 8 feet wide. And you got 5-foot sidewalks. The first concept that we shared previously is this 4-lane option. So a couple things to point out here. Instead of those 12-foot travel lanes, we would reduce those and narrow them down to 11 feet for the inside lanes and 10 feet for the outside lanes. That has a benefit of helping calm traffic and slow it down. Then to fit in a buffered bicycle lane, which you can see here is 5 feet wide with a 2-foot painted buffer. This concept 1, would require removing parking on one side of the street. And we're not here to say which side of the street, but I'll get into more detailed analysis in a minute here about what that would mean in terms of impacts. Some other things to point out with these concepts is, as you can see in blue, the curb radius reduction or the curb extensions. That provides additional visibility for people crossing the street and slows down traffic from making those turns so they can do it at a safer speed. In terms of new features, you can see here at the corners, at driveway corners, we've added driveway buffers. So it's painted space where people would not park. And this gives a little more visibility for people getting in and out of the driveways. These also provide opportunities for people to put their trash bins out on trash pickup days in those sightline buffer areas. And on the street side that would lose parking, those would need to stay on the sidewalks. The second option is called the 2-lane option. This would take your 2 travel lanes in each direction and take it down to 1 travel lane in each direction and add a 2-way center turn lane down the middle. The benefit of this is that people getting in and out of their driveways, instead of having to turn left across 2 lanes of traffic and try and find the gap, this allows them to move out of the traffic, wait for that gap, and cross only 1 lane in the opposing direction. So it's a safer orientation. Also, the lanes would be narrowed down to 11 feet and 10 feet for that center turn lane. So there's some traffic calming, speed calming built into the design. The feature of this would also be preserving on-street parking on each side of the street and getting in those buffers. There would be a little bit more buffer space, 5 feet, and then the 3-foot painted buffer. And in terms of the intersections, the same as before, there'd be the curb radius reduction to make it easier for people that are walking to cross the street. On both sides of the street, you have the trash bin locations for pickup within those driveway buffer areas. And then the third concept is what we've called the parking protected option. It's very similar to the concept 2 that I just showed, but you're flipping the bike lane and the parking lane. So now you have the sidewalk, then the bicycle lane, a 3-foot painted buffer, and then you have your parked cars that would be floating in a parking lane before you get to the travel lanes there. Same dimensions as before in terms of the travel lanes, and a little bit more space at the intersections here. I will mention that in addition to the parked cars in that buffer space, not of course blocking the driveways, but there would be some sort of vertical element, and we haven't decided what that would be. That would be later stages of design to figure that out, but it could be bollards, or it could be curb stops, it could be planted median, it could have a lot of different features and different looks and feels. So there would be additional physical barrier. This concept appeals most to young kids, novices, maybe older folks bicycling, because it gets that extra protection between them and high-speed motor vehicles. And again, the driveway buffer, you can see that here, making it easier for people to get in and out of driveways, and also providing opportunities for storing the trash bins for pickup. All right, so in terms of the impacts that these concepts would have on different conditions, I want to go into that now. So the first thing is speed and safety. We looked at the most 5 recent years of data that was available from 2015 to 2019 about collisions that were happening on the corridor. And we can report that there was one fatal collision at Saratoga and Pruneridge. There was a collision that had severe injuries, that meant going to the hospital. That was a pedestrian near Kiley and Pruneridge, and then 13 collisions with visible injuries. You can see in the light blue here, kind of spread out across the corridor. Posted speed limit is 35 miles per hour. We collected speed survey information in February of 2021. And what I'll point out is that in February 2021, there was a lockdown in place. And so there were the volumes, the number of people out there on the roads were down, and nationally speeds went up. With fewer cars out there obstructing you, you can travel at higher rates. And so we definitely saw that. So these numbers may be more than a typical day after COVID. So I just want to make sure that that's clear and when I report this information. That being said, the numbers that we collected support what we heard from the public before, that people are moving at higher rates of speed, certainly during the non-AM and PM peak hours. 44% of drivers were exceeding the speed limit between Pomeroy and Kiley. They weren't going too much further than that. 85% of drivers were below 39 miles per hour. So yes, speeding, but we're not seeing just incredibly high rates. Nobody's, there aren't a lot of people out going 60 on Pruneridge, but even still, we know that 35 miles per hour can be deadly and lead to those severe collisions. So it's exceeding that speed limit. 39% of drivers exceeded 35 miles per hour with a speed limit between Kiley and Saratoga. Still, the majority are below 40 miles per hour. The area where we see the highest rates of people speeding is between Saratoga and Winchester. 57% of drivers, when we collected our information over several days, were going above the speed limit, and the majority were below 41 miles per hour. This, I think, is attributable to the fact that there are very few stops or signals between Saratoga and Winchester. So the way that the road is designed feels like you should travel at higher rates of speed. So what does this information tell us about each of the concepts? The first, no build option, if keeping the street as it is, would not have any potential collision reduction or speed reduction factors. If you went with the 4-lane option, which has lane narrowing, which I mentioned before, we don't have enough research nationally to talk about what that would do for collision reduction, but we do know that potential speed reduction would go down between 1 and 6 miles per hour just by narrowing the travel lanes. If you go with concept 2, the 2-lane option, you get the lane narrowing plus reconfiguring the roadway. From the Federal Highway Administration, which has done extensive national study of this over the last 25 years, they've reported those streets that do this reconfiguration see between a 19 and 47% crash reduction, along with the narrowing travel lanes get 3 to 6 miles per hour slower. And then on top of that, the parking protected option, concept 3, you get the lane narrowing, you get the reconfiguration, and you get the bicycle protection. And that bicycle protection, we're not seeing yet. It's a relatively new design, and we've not seen enough national research to report back on the collision reduction for bicyclists, but you get the same benefits as the concept 2. We looked also what the road reconfiguration did in terms of collisions on either side of Pruneridge Avenue. So first we looked at the road reconfiguration from Tantal to Pomeroy. This is what the street looked like before. So very similar, almost exactly identical to our study corridor. And then after the road reconfiguration went in, the city saw a 15% collision reduction. On West Heading in the city of San Jose, the north-south street here that's not labeled as Winchester Boulevard. So at the very beginning of our corridor study, this is how it looked before. So again, very identical, 2 lanes in each direction. After the reconfiguration, the city of San Jose reported a 33% collision reduction in the years before versus the same period after. Parking analysis. So we did a really exhaustive parking analysis. We took parking counts on both sides of Pruneridge Avenue from and including Pomeroy all the way to and including Winchester. We did these in March of 2021. So again, during lockdown during COVID. And so we could probably assume that this is the highest demand for on-street parking when people were not traveling to jobs. And we took parking counts at multiple times during the day. So we did block long counts on all of the side streets on both sides of Pruneridge. And we conducted these during 3 weekdays. And each of those weekdays we conducted it at 7 to 9 a.m. We then conducted it again at 11 to 2 p.m. And we did counts between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. to figure out the overnight needs. We came back on a Saturday and did it also 2 time periods between 11 and 2 and 5 and 8. So what the data I'm presenting here is the average utilization across those time periods. And we have detailed maps for each of those time periods if the staff or if the public would like to see as well. So really what this utilization understanding helps us understand is concept 1, which would require the removal of on-street parking. So from this information, you can see here is that there are 220 available parking spaces on the north side of Pruneridge. What we observed on average is that 43 cars are using those spaces. And so you have a utilization rate of 19%. We have more cars available, more spaces available on the south side, 233, with an average of 38 observed, so 16%. So on average, about 18% or 8 out of 10 parking spaces available during a period which we think would have the highest demand for parking. Shown graphically here in the navy, this is blocks on side streets as well as on either side of Pruneridge that have greater than 50% of the available on-street parking available. And the lighter blue between 30 and 50%, yellow 15 to 30%, and anything in red is less than 15% or heavily parked up with not available parking spaces. So you can see here on average, this is what it looks like. Taking out some of these example blocks like Radcliffe to Woodhams is 5 out of 36 available spots are used. The area where we see a little bit more use is Saratoga to Cypress on the north side, 17 out of 28 spaces used, but still available on the side streets and across the street. And then this area from Saratoga to Herald, this is the area where it's in front of the Sportsman Lounge or the laundromat. 12 out of 15 spaces are used here. We did not count also if people were fully utilizing the off-street parking lots that are here and then across the street, the 7-Eleven and at the shops across the street. So what would happen if parking were removed on the north side of the street and consolidated? On typical block, there would still be 6 out of 10 parking spaces. And this is assuming that everybody would park across the street instead of using the side streets, which also could accommodate all of the available parking needs. On the south side, again, 6 out of 10 or 35% utilization. So there'd still be plenty of parking spaces available if the city pursued concept 1. traffic analysis. So I'm going to get into a little bit more information here. We started our analysis, traffic analysis, by collecting turning movements or intersection counts for bicycles, for pedestrians, and for vehicles at 25 locations. We collected all of that on a midweek day in February of 2021, so during COVID. And I'll get you a little bit more about how we corrected for that, because we know that volumes were lower than on typical, and so we've factored that in. Intersections are evaluated using the city's transportation analysis policy, and this uses level of service, or something called LOS, and that evaluates the operations or the congestion people would face at different intersections, and they're scored an A through an F. Don't think of this in terms of being back in grade school, and an A is what we should all strive for, and F means you flunked. An A could mean that the street is overbuilt and that cars are going at very high rates of speed. So what the city does in its general plan is set out its goals for what would be acceptable operational values. And those are really between an A and a D. So if you get a C, an A, B, C, or D, you're meeting the city's goals. They also make exceptions for San Tomas Expressway, where E is also acceptable on these major expressways. F is unacceptable anywhere, and E is not meeting the goals on city streets. So traffic counts, again, were collected in February and adjusted to better represent pre-COVID volumes. And I'm going to share with you how we did that in a second. And then we also looked at traffic counts projected for 2030 and 2040 for existing and all concepts. And for 2030, what we did was factored in all of the developments that were on the books that have been approved and also being proposed, so we could factor in the additional traffic that we could see coming from those new developments in our analysis. I mentioned the 25 study intersections. 12 of them are along Pruneridge, 5 are on Forbes, 5 on Homestead, and 3 on Mauricia. We started by collecting those counts during COVID at 25 locations, and then we reviewed historical counts. We have 8 locations, 4 of them are on Pruneridge from before COVID, the years right before 2018 and 2019. So pretty fresh information about the volumes of people driving along Pruneridge. We compared the counts that we took to the counts that we had, and we created an adjustment factor. So we looked at that and said, how much fewer cars are traveling compared to pre-COVID? And that's the average that we used to then bump up all of our count numbers. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here. So these are the 8 historical count locations. You can see here the intersections, the dates those counts were taken, the counts, and then as they compared with the 2021 counts that we took. So in the same locations, we did it again and saw the decrease, the lower volumes that we can expect during COVID. So on average, 63% fewer cars during the AM peak period and 42% fewer cars during the PM, the evening rush. And so those are the numbers that we used to then increase all of those 25 count locations. We bumped them up by 63% in the morning and 42% in the evening to get what we believe is a more realistic accounting of car movements pre-COVID. So running that through the analysis, I want to walk you through kind of which intersections are operating acceptably and which ones are not meeting the goals. Today, San Tomas does not meet the city's goals for operations. That's that one you see here in the second column, but 24 of the 25 do, and that would be the same for concept 1. Today, if concept 2 or 3 were constructed, that's the road reconfiguration, you would get San Tomas not meeting the goals. In addition, you get 4 others, and these 4 are on Pruneridge at Kylie, at Tan Oak, at Saratoga, and at Cypress. Those additional 4 would not meet the city's goals. We've mapped those out as well at different points of the day. So in the morning, this is what you could see if you were out driving before COVID at those volumes that I mentioned before. You can see that you've got Kylie and you've got Saratoga at D. It's acceptable, but it's kind of on the borderline. And you've got F there at San Tomas Expressway. With concepts 2 and 3, you can see how those shift down and create issues at Cypress, at Saratoga, at San Tomas Expressway as before, and at Kylie. In the evening, very similar situation. And then with concept 2 and 3, you can see issues at San Tomas, at Tan Oak, and at Kylie. So in the year 2030, we could see, we expect 18% higher traffic volumes than today. And the current no build option or the concept one, which are identical in terms of impacts to traffic, doing nothing, you would see 3 intersections not meeting the goals. In addition to San Tomas Expressway, you get Pomeroy and Homestead and Kylie and Homestead. And that could be due to other factors at play here and something that the city will be looking at in terms of ways to mitigate or reduce those impacts. And then in addition, you'd get a couple more intersections not meeting the goals on concepts 2 and 3. And those would be, in addition to the San Tomas and Pruneridge and Pomeroy and Homestead and Kylie and Homestead that you would get for the first 2, you'd also add to that Kylie and Pruneridge, Tan Oak and Pruneridge, Saratoga and Pruneridge, Cypress and Pruneridge, and San Tomas and Forbes not meeting the goals. So again, this is looking at 2030 with doing nothing or concept 1. Sorry, I went too fast there. And then this is the morning with concepts 2 or 3. You can see those intersections not meeting the city's goals for level of service. And then the evening rush hour, these are the intersections that are not meeting the goals. And then these with the concepts 2 and 3 that I just mentioned before. So these are during the rush hours. Certainly during most times of the day, you would not see these same impacts or effects, but we wanted to make sure that during the most congested hours, we were giving you information about what that would mean. We also looked at travel time. Travel time in the morning takes 8.2 minutes in the busiest direction during rush hour. And that roadway also got a scoring, a level of service scoring of D, so meeting acceptable time periods. With the road reconfiguration across the whole corridor, concepts 2 and 3, you would see that increase by 105% to 16.8 minutes to travel the corridor during those rush hour periods. And that would be a level of service F. In the evening eastbound, currently it takes 10.8 minutes and has an LOS of E. And that would increase to 14.7 minutes, I'm sorry, a 37% increase, and that also bring it down to a level F. And these are all for 2030, I should mention. We also looked at neighborhood traffic diversion. We heard loud and clear from residents at first 2 rounds of workshops that they were really worried about the level of diversion from Pruneridge into using side streets. And so we also modeled that in the year 2030 to figure out what would happen in terms of traffic. And what we've done here is run all the different permutations that a vehicle could travel to get to their destinations using and thinking about the service delays that might be impacted here. So in blue, and the thicker the line weight in blue means the more decrease of traffic diverting off of Pruneridge to take alternate routes. And in orange, you see the increased traffic. And the very thinnest line is between 50 and 100 vehicles per hour. And then it goes up to the thickest, which is really, there's only one at the very thickest level, and that's a decrease on Pruneridge Avenue of greater than 300 vehicles per hour. So you can see here, the majority of folks from what we've identified would be in the morning rush hour, staying on San Tomas Expressway and maybe exiting at different intersections instead of Pruneridge, or using Stevens Creek Boulevard. There might be some diversion as well onto other local streets, but it'd be less than 50 vehicles in an hour, which would be almost imperceptible, less than a vehicle a minute. So if you're out there sitting and counting your traffic in your front yard, you would have to really think, have a clipboard out and really count the cars to see the additional increase there. So we think it would be almost imperceptible. There could be some small amount of cut through. In the evening, very similar. We see a little bit more activity on Los Padres Boulevard. So I'm not going to say it certainly is not without some diversion, but again, the majority would be using Stevens Creek, San Tomas Expressway, or staying on Winchester or Los Padres. So those areas between 50 and 100 additional vehicles diverted to make their destinations. So in summary, we looked at 3 intersections that had a poor level of service for options 1 or no build and option 1, 8 for concept 2 or 3. An average time to travel the corridor, so AM and PM together, 9.5 minutes for your current configuration, and then 15 minutes and 45 seconds for concepts 2 and 3. And in terms of diversion, more than 100 cars diverted onto side streets. You wouldn't get any on the no build or the concept 1, and then you'd have more than 100 on San Tomas and Stevens Creek. We also looked at vehicle miles traveled, what this would do to potentially decrease or increase more people driving. There would be no change, of course, for no build in concept 1. And with the new ways people might use to get into their final destinations, we modeled a very modest 0.5% reduction in vehicle miles traveled. So just wanted to share that there. These numbers do not account for any mode shift from people driving to bicycling or walking for trip purposes. In order to do that, we'd have to look more broadly than those 25 intersections and think about it at a more multi-municipal or regional level to factor those in there. So briefly in summary, and then we're going to get to Q&A where we can get your feedback and get your questions answered. Again, please use the Q&A window if you've got some questions, you want to start to fire those away. But in summary, I wanted to think back through some of the goals that we heard from the public in our first couple rounds. Reducing speeds and improving safety. Which options do that? You get that with the 4-lane option, the 2-lane option, and the parking protected option by either narrowing the travel lane or reconfiguring the roadway to make it safer. Excuse me. Preserving on-street parking. You get that with the no build option, and you get that with options 2 and 3. There would be some parking removal for those site buffers, those driveway buffers, but again, we're talking maybe a quarter length of a car or half of a car length at those driveways. Which option would minimize additional congestion? Unfortunately, none of these options reduce congestion, but the ones that minimize that additional congestion, you get that with no build or concept 1. And then which are the options that improve walking or bicycling options? Obviously the ones that improve ability to cross the street, to walk along Pruneridge Avenue, or to have better bike facilities. And those are options 1, 2, or 3. So we're going to get to our last poll to keep it interactive here. And we're going to ask people to give us some feedback about which concept they prefer. And just to jog your memory again, this is the existing no build option, 2 lanes of traffic in either direction, parking on each side of the street. Concept 1 is the 4-lane option. This would require removing parking on one side of the street, but you get to retain those 4 travel lanes, and there'd be limited impacts to travel congestion. The concept 2 is your 2-lane option. Your buffered bike lanes fit in here. You preserve parking. And then concept 3 is your parking protected option, more comfort for people in the bicycle lane, same impacts and benefits that I mentioned before for concept 2. So with that, let's go ahead and have my colleague John launch our 3rd and final poll. And in this, I want you to rank the concepts in order of your preference. If the city were to think about implementing any of these, which ones would you want in order of your preference? So your first choice is the one that you want as your top, your most favorable preference. And then 4th is the one you like the least, right? And so when you rank these in 1, 2, 3, or 4 order. And thanks again for everybody. Our attendance numbers are now 22 members of the community are with us. And so I want to give everybody the opportunity to participate in this poll. So take your time, think through 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th preference. And at this point, we're gonna go quickly into the Q&A after these polls, but take your time answering the poll. If you've got feedback, some comments that you want to share, or even a question that you'd like to discuss, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll get you in the queue to start getting into that in just a minute here. So right now, 63% of the attendees have participated in the poll. So we'll give it a couple, maybe 30 more seconds for folks to get in there answers. I want to make sure that people have an opportunity to get their thoughts in, and then we'll share out the results from what this room thinks in terms of preference. Before this slide presentation will be posted on the city's website. This webinar is being recorded as well. You can go back and watch this again. We'll also be releasing a survey that asks these questions. I'll be sharing that out to get more input from the public. So there will be opportunities to answer this again. Okay, I'm going to give 5 more seconds. So if you want to participate in the poll, go ahead and do so now. All right, we're going to end the poll here. And I'll share the results here. Okay. So in terms of the no build or existing conditions option, you see that that has strong support as a first option, and then also very strong preference for 4th place option. Concept 1, not as much strong as in terms of 1st place, but seems like a lot of people's 2nd place option and 3rd place option. Concept 2, very few people ranked it as their 1st option, but also kind of equal number have it as a 2nd place, maybe about equal scoring in 3rd and 4th. And clearly the concept 3 here today, there's a lot of folks that favor this one. It's the most popular 1st place option. So thank you everybody for providing that just snap poll information. We're going to share this back with the City Council along with all the other input we're taking. So I'm going to turn off the poll, share with you our next steps. Where do we go from here? We've got a council study session scheduled for March 8th. We're going to present to them this information plus the input we would hear from you today. We're going to identify recommendations to address some of the traffic delays, some of the congestion deficiencies that I've talked about here, trying to figure out if there's ways that we can modify those or improve those. We'll develop cost estimates so we can share with council what each of these options could cost. We'll put that information into a draft plan that will come out this spring. That will be made available to anybody that was on the call today. We'll email you out when that's available. You can comment on that draft plan. We'll then revise it and then bring it back to council this summer. And then at that point, they'll decide what they'd like to do. So I want you to stay involved with us. Please take our survey when that's available by going to the project website. You'll get an email from us, or you can send us an email at pruneridgeavplan@altago.com. If email is not your thing, you can leave us a voicemail message. We check those every week and record those and catalog them. So 408-320-7060 will get our voicemail service. And also feel free to attend future city council meetings. And you can also voice your ideas, your vision, your concerns there. So with that, I just want to say thank you for making time on a Saturday afternoon to be with us and to receive all this information. I know it was a lot to share. Let's go into Q&A now. Carol Chariot from the city is going to manage our Q&A. And right now I see one hand up raised, and that's from Lance. So Lance, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself and please share with us your feedback or ask a question.
The question that we have is that we didn't get the we didn't get to vote.
Yeah.
That never came up for us, and we didn't see the responses to that. It just all stayed as the green screen.
All right, let's see. Would you be comfortable typing in your responses into the Q&A window or sending us an email?
You know what? I'll send you an email because I don't know where the Q&A is.
Okay, I apologize for that, Lance. Or you can just tell us and we can record it. We got staff here with pens and paper. We can record it as well to make it easy.
We wanted this option number 2,
okay,
which would be very similar to the plan that was implemented from Lawrence Expressway to Pomeroy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate that. Oh, I might have cut you off too early there, Lance. I'm sorry. Go ahead. And if you've got more feedback, go ahead and unmute and share more.
We didn't want, 1 was the
Okay.
next one, and then 3 was the last one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just
great.
curiosity, why would you want a different design, the city that's saying that a different from road design from Lawrence Expressway to Pomeroy, and which is fine. I think it's a very good plan, and then change it at Pomeroy to Winchester into 2 or 3 other plans, creating a very you just don't know what's coming next because it's all scrambled. Do you know what I mean?
Carol, do you want to take that?
Yes,
That's it. I think you should, for consistency, stay with the same thing that you had on Lawrence Expressway to Pomeroy.
yes, thank you. We appreciate your feedback, and definitely we have heard from, multiple people that they would like to keep the same design throughout the whole corridor. But definitely we wanted to give people options in case, say, people didn't like the current design, west of Pomeroy, and then also give that option as well to council, just so that we can say there's multiple ways to be able to add in the bike lane. And we definitely wanted to, present that to the public and to the council. But we have definitely heard from people that some people would like to just keep the design the same throughout the whole corridor. So thank you for your feedback on that.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have John Cordes. John, you're up. Go ahead and provide your feedback or ask your question.
Thank you, Jeff and Carol. Thanks for this opportunity to comment on the plan. Appreciate the detail and all the data analysis that has gone into this plan. It's really amazing how much information you're providing to the public to help them make decisions. I think it's the most detailed roadway study I think I've seen of any city around. So thank you for that. I agree with the last speaker in that I think hopefully if the public and the city council chooses a different roadway concept from Pomeroy to Winchester, that then the city, when it finds funds, will back implement that all the way to Lawrence Expressway. I also want to say, if cities are going to be meeting their VMT reduction goals, it seems silly in the planning models to assume that there's going to be no change in mode shift. So I don't know if Alta or the city should start making different assumptions about how we're going to be getting around in 2040 than compared to the way we are getting around today. Other than that, I think it's a spectacular job. I hope a lot of people will support. My personal favorite is option 4. And I hope a lot of people will decide to support that or option 3. It seems to have the biggest safety improvement and is more in line with where the city's trying to go as far as making it safer. When it adopts the Vision Zero plan, it'll align much better with that, to making the city safer for everyone, particularly for children that are going to want to use this road to get places. Goodbye.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your feedback.
Okay, up next is Mary Lou. Go ahead, Mary Lou, with your comment or your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff and Carol. I really appreciate how you have led these public presentations. I want to comment on, I want to give advanced warning to the city of Santa Clara that whatever changes ultimately get implemented, to make sure that they have the street cleaning devices that are able to keep the bike lanes clean. I live in San Jose, and San Jose has implemented a number of protected bike lanes, which I really appreciate. But where they have fallen down is that they don't have the resources or enough resources to keep them clean. So often I don't use the protected bike lane because it's not clean enough, and I will bike out onto the street, which, it defeats the whole purpose of it. It's really a shame. So these are the kind of things that the city has to anticipate by perhaps buying street cleaners that are more narrow, that will pass through a bike lane and things like that. So I'm just letting I would like the city to know that it's not just funding and building, but it's also maintaining and to have the resources ready to maintain as soon as it goes online.
Yes, thank you, Mary Lou. Those are really great points, and that's definitely something that the city also has to look at once we actually get money to design and construct the project. Definitely having a narrower street sweeper is something that we definitely have to work with our streets department on. Thank you very much for that feedback.
Okay, Carol, next up we have Jim. Jim, go ahead with your question or your comment. Jim, are you able to unmute? I think you've got to do it on your side.
There we go. Is that
There
better?
you go. Yep, we can hear you now. Go for it.
I'm a crossing guard at Kylie and Kaiser. And one thing that I noticed that has really reduced congestion when there are walk and left-hand turn lanes is that they're staggered. The walk light goes on and 5 seconds later, the green light goes on for people that say that are turning left, so that the pedestrians get into the crosswalk, and that really seems to help a lot with close calls. You just don't get the close calls because it's obvious that there's a pedestrian there. And on the other end of the spectrum, which they don't do there at Kaiser and Kylie, you should turn off the walk light to stop walking and allow the green light for the people that are turning so that they have time to get through. And that really reduces congestion at the intersection, because I wholeheartedly believe the biggest problem with any of these options is the sequencing of the lights that causes backlogs at the intersections of San Tomas and the intersection of Lawrence. No matter what you do, if those lights are not fixed, you're going to have 50 cars lined up at the left-hand turn lane in the morning and the same thing in the afternoon. And it's the reason why I avoid Pruneridge altogether during commute times. I make it a special point not to go at that intersection at Lawrence, and a special point not to go to that intersection at San Tomas, because there's times when you want to turn left onto San Tomas off of Pruneridge. I have had to wait 4 cycles. One time I've had to wait 4 cycles to get through the intersection. And that's the reason, because of that, that's the reason why you have so many red light runners. And those red light runners really causes the danger. So there has to be a sequencing of some kind to allow the people to get through the intersection without having to wait 2 and maybe 3 cycles of the light to get through. Because sometimes that'll take as much as 8 minutes if it's 3 cycles of the light.
Great.
I thank you. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, because it's a big help. I have been an avid bicyclist for a long time, and actually it turns out I'm riding more now in my later years than say 15, 20 years ago. So I appreciate this. And like I say, my preference is in reverse order of your 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is my number 1 choice, and 3, and then 2, and then 1. So I really appreciate what you're doing, because it's going to be a big help, I believe.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for your feedback. And just to let you know that the city is actually pursuing a project where we're going to try to synchronize the lights along Pruneridge so that, people can go at a an even speed along there. And so you won't hit as many, hopefully, red lights as you're going down the roadway. But just to let you know, we're definitely looking into trying to get grant funding to be able to synchronize those lights along Pruneridge. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for being here and for your comments. We've got next up, we'll take one more. That's the last person with their hand raised, and then we'll go over to the Q&A window and answer a couple of those questions. So we're not cutting this off for anybody. If you've got more to say or a follow-up question or more feedback, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll join you in the Q&A window. So let's go ahead and see. Next up, the last one with the hand raised right now is John C. Go ahead, John C. You're up.
Hello. Hey, thank you so much, Carol and crew. Thank you. This was a really, really very nicely done presentation. And I want to compliment the team in the city on being real thorough. I've lived in Santa Clara since 1996. I'm pretty much right off of Los Padres and Talia Avenue, right by Everett Alvarez Park. I use Los Padres, Benton, Forbes, and Pruneridge probably a dozen times a week for work, and with two little kids, my wife and I are all over. I want to thank you for the thoughtfulness and the details. I heard some of our fellow citizens speak. Glad to hear everybody's opinions too. I'm probably of the perspective that whether we add bike lanes or not, we're not going to reduce the number of cars on the road in the way that our metropolitan area is set up. So I am really far more concerned about traffic and traffic safety than probably maybe the majority of folks with two little kids. That said, the city's goal to make the streets safer, I think, is great. I do have two real specific questions for you, and you may not be able to answer them today, which would be great, but don't mind sending an email too. In the event we do lane reductions, and the likelihood that, and I think your study showed this, when you double the traffic time, you're acknowledging that you're still going to have the same number of cars, if not more, driving. How does the city intend to mitigate the pollution impact to those of us who live right near Pruneridge? I mean, the more cars that we have that are going to be idling for twice as long means effectively twice as much pollution for me and my neighbors and my kids and my wife to inhale. And, you know, I live less than a quarter mile away. So I'd like to know how the city plans on mitigating that. And in the broader sense, you know, I bike often. I bike on Pruneridge. I always wear a helmet because it is necessary and it's not always safe. I absolutely agree. But by definition, those of us who are fortunate enough to bike are not the majority of the population. There's senior citizens. When I take my kids to soccer, there's no way I can bike from here down to the Santa Clara soccer fields that are on the other side of town for me. And I can use Pruneridge in my car, but there's no realistic way that I could take them safely on their bikes. They're not that well practiced. And certainly seniors aren't going to be jumping on their bikes too often. I'd like to know how the city plans to approach that and mitigate that impact. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, John. Well, at least in terms of, you know, your concern about idling, and especially around, you know, your home and homes, you know, within and around Pruneridge. And I think I brought this up in the last question was, you know, one of the ways is definitely to synchronize our traffic lights, because we hope that will help move vehicles a little faster and not this stop and go that can, you know, produce pollution. So that's one of the ways we definitely can help synchronize those lights. And then also, you know, throughout the city, we do try to synchronize along other corridors as well. So hopefully people don't try to cut across over to Pruneridge and they remain on those, you know, really major arterials like Stevens Creek. And in terms of seniors, I mean, we definitely, you know, not only want to look at, you know, biking improvements, but also, you know, walking improvements, because seniors maybe would prefer to, you know, walk to their destination, or they may prefer to take transit, which we have the Valley Transportation Authority that really deals with, you know, the bus routes, but hopefully through us trying to make better walking improvements along the corridor, that seniors would feel more comfortable walking to their destination. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks, John, for your thoughtful feedback and for being here today. Let's go to the Q&A window. Jonathan, is there a question here that you or the city staff would like to take up first? I see one from William and one from Betsy.
Yeah, I think thanks, Jeff. Both the questions were similar to the prior speaker. One from William was just asking about potential mitigation solutions on pinch points. I think Carol kind of touched on that a little bit. And then another question is from Betsy asking about also the consideration for mitigation of traffic diversion or traffic calming on neighborhood streets.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do have a neighborhood traffic calming program, but we also have to, I just want to make people aware that those type of, traffic calming improvements are mainly done on residential streets. So that's something, since Pruneridge is an arterial, we couldn't do any type of like speed bumps or speed humps. But definitely, because we had shown you the traffic diversion where, some vehicles will go, that, it is possible to do some type of traffic calming on some of those residential streets.
All right, John C., go ahead.
Thanks. I forgot to ask this team real fast. Given the traffic impact and the traffic congestion, did you look at alternative traffic safe bike routes around that Pruneridge corridor through like Los Padres and Forbes or down through Forest, and assess the viability of those paths given the expected volume of bicycle traffic? I'm sure you studied what you think the bicycle traffic congestion looks like, and I'm hoping you guys made an assessment on why the alternative streets would not be a safer and more city balanced impact as opposed to just Pruneridge per se. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Actually, John, we probably a couple of years ago, we actually updated our bicycle master plan, which we looked at, all the roadways within Santa Clara as to where would we best put a bicycle lane, and also what type of bicycle facility. And definitely, so we looked all around the city, and also just to let you know, this bike lane on Pruneridge happened to rank number 2 out of all our bicycle facility projects within that bicycle master plan.
And I can also just comment on that as well. Having worked on that study those years ago, we did look at the side streets, and through pretty rigorous community input and technical analysis, what we heard clearly was that people wanted a direct connection, and the city should also not maybe either or, but also look at improvements on Forbes and on Mauricia and other side streets where it made appropriate sense to do that too. Yeah, another good comment. Thank you, John. I don't see any of the other folks with their hands raised. And do we have any more questions in the? Okay, we got a question here on the window. Jonathan, do you want to answer this one, or do you want me to try and take this one on?
I guess either Jeff or Carol. The question was about bicycle statistics. Could you share some of the numbers collected as part of the project?
Got it. Yes. I'd have to go back to confirm it. We could share this afterwards, but I think that during the peak period, we saw 40 bicyclists out there on the road during peak periods. And so certainly in terms of percentage of all of road users, people walking, bicycling, unicycle, bicycling is a low rate of travel. And that, I think, is to be expected, right? When you have a condition where you've got tens of thousands of vehicles on traveling at 35 miles per hour, and you're asking to be sharing that space with a large motor vehicle, it's not comfortable. And so you're going to see low numbers of people bicycling. What we heard from the master plan that I just mentioned is a really latent demand of people that would bicycle and would like to bicycle on Pruneridge if safer facilities were provided. And so, yes, I think it would be good for us to maybe as part of an addendum to this slideshow, or when we go to council, maybe share out some of those numbers and help give more information to the public to help make a decision. All right, we've still got 13 folks with us. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A or hands raised, but that doesn't mean this is the end of our dialogue. So if you've got additional thoughts, send us a voicemail message or an email. Stay tuned for an email from our team, from Carol, about when this recording will be available, when the slideshow will be posted, and when the survey will be up and live to collect more information. So if you've got other thoughts to engage with us, feel free to do so. We're still revising, we're still working through some of these issues, and we're still waiting to get feedback from council to make decisions about where this study will go. So Carol, Jonathan, we also have Mike Liu here from the city. Any other follow-up questions you want to share or thoughts before we dismiss?
No, I just want to say thank you again for taking time out of your busy Saturday, and we appreciate you. And please feel free to go to the webpage and get any other information that maybe you missed early on about the project. And definitely we'll be posting the recordings and the online survey where you can take the survey again after you've had some time to look through the PowerPoint presentation. And you can vote one more time, and all your votes will be recorded, and we'll present that to council. Thank you very much.
Great, Jonathan, any other follow-up thoughts?
No, I think Carol captured it. Just wanted to once again thank everyone for participating and providing us the valuable input we need. Great.
Well, wonderful. Well, we thank you all. Thanks for being here. If staff could just sit tight for a second, and we'll let our attendees, members of the public, get on with their days. So thank you, everybody. And John, you can go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.